Welcome to the WWE Podcast, your place for the most passionate wrestling analysis on the web.
Just turn Roman heel. What is WWE waiting for?
When other wrestling podcasts put you to sleep, you can count on the WWE Podcast to keep you engaged and asking for more.
I've been watching wrestling for over 20 years, and that was one of the best matches I've ever seen.
This is unlike any other wrestling analysis. So without any further delay, let's get the show started right now.
Welcome to the WWE Podcast on this Thursday, August 22nd, 2019. Today, I have another co-host for you, back-to-back days of co-hosts. I don't know if that's ever happened in the history of this show, but you guys get a taste of it today, and it was another long conversation that's not a complaint whatsoever with my co-host Anthony DiMarco, who is just always a pleasure to talk wrestling with, and we covered not just everything from this week and getting his perspectives on everything, but boy, we travel back in time. We really put a positive spin on the current product, not without criticisms, and not, of course not. We talk more about why Kofi does not feel like a real champion to us, which we are doubling down on from 3 weeks ago. So I think you guys will enjoy that, or maybe very, very vigorously disagree with us, and that's cool. That's cool. That's what this is all about, is being able to converse and give opinions. So It's a great show. I think you're going to enjoy it. We cover, my God, the Kevin Owens and Shane dynamic. We covered we covered Becky Lynch and how we're ready to see her drop the belt, and the love of Sasha Banks thus far as how she's been presented, the Fiend, and where we think he's going to end up, with him attacking legends. And so it's a great listen. I think you guys will enjoy it. Overall, we praise the product of where WWE is at right now, and all the small changes they're making are really adding up and being visible in the weekly shows now. So it's for the most part a positive show. So those of you that are adverse to the negative criticisms of WWE, I think those are kept to mostly a minimum, but for those of you that thrive on that stuff, don't worry, that's included too. But again, guys, this is the WWE Podcast, and we'll get to that conversation in just a moment. But first, just a reminder to head over to the website at WWEpodcast.com for all of your shows and being able to support the show with the Support the Show tab that's right at the top of the page. And there's an Amazon banner once you click in there, and just do your shopping as normal. Really is a huge help to the show, and thank you to everybody who's done that thus far. You can also head on over to any podcast app that supports ratings and just give us a 5-star rating and review. I promise that's a super easy way, and also free way to support the show. And another way to support the show is also on patreon.com/WWE Podcast, where if you all hate ads, that's where the ads go away. They just disappear. For all of the shows of this podcast are available there for your listening pleasure, and you can get them ad-free. So that's another cool way to support the show that also benefits you for not having to skip through ads or suffer through them for that matter, right? So, but anyway, guys, thank you for listening. And those listeners who are new, you can find us everywhere podcasts are available, from Apple to Google to Spotify and TuneIn and iHeartRadio and CastBox and SoundCloud. Everywhere you can pretty much imagine this show should exist. Stitcher too. So just head on over. If you don't have Apple, there's tons of other options out there. We will be there. I pinky promise. So, all right. Well, that's all the housekeeping items, the usual. Let's get to the conversation with Anthony DiMarco, covering everything you can imagine from this week in wrestling. And don't forget, I'll be back Sunday with your wrestling nostalgia, and then back to the normal schedule. I told you guys I was back on a normal schedule, and not only was I on a normal schedule this week, but I also did 2 guest host spots, which is always a treat, and I loved it, and I hope you guys did too. So back Sunday. Everybody enjoy their weekend. Let's get to that conversation with Anthony DiMarco and This Week in WWE. All right, it's Thursday, and that means it's time for a co-host to join me. And this week, Anthony DiMarco is back after a 3-week hiatus, as all my co-hosts are, and it is awesome to have him back. And I'm sure that he's going to start us off with something hot, something very topical. And Anthony, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Matt. Glad to be back, and I'm really anxious to get going here.
Me too. You are the podcast's favorite Canadian, I have to say. I mean, so you're the favorite Canadian co-host of the show. So I just have to say that. And so Anthony, start us off here. There are tons of places that we could start, and I'm going to toss it to you to decide where we go. So the floor is yours.
Well, I have to say it's been a few weeks now where it's been overwhelmingly positive content from WWE. And I'm going to go a bit off the board here, but I think my favorite thing of this week was the alliance between Sami Zayn and Shinsuke Nakamura. I could not think of a more random yet perfect combination, because I think the last time I was on the show with you, I was talking about how frustrated I was that Shinsuke Nakamura, that although he's the Intercontinental Champion, he's just been kind of lost in the abyss. And kind of ditto for Sami Zayn. But they're both great in their own right, because Sami Zayn is a great talker but can't win a match, even whether or not that's booking related or what have you. And Shinsuke Nakamura is one of the best in-ring performers in the ring, but he struggles a lot due to his promos and his lack of English skills, I'll say. But honestly, I think that this is a great combination. I feel like it's a match made in heaven, and I'm really looking forward to see where this goes. And I love that Sami Zayn's going to be placed in a predominant role here. I think he's going to shine being the mouthpiece for Nakamura, and I think Nakamura's character is going to get more traction as well, finally having a guy who can, express himself properly.
This is a pairing that I don't think we knew we wanted until it was presented to us. And yes, it just happened. We've got a long way to go to decide whether or not this is a successful pairing. But these two need each other in the worst way. And you said it. I mean, Shinsuke has the Intercontinental Championship, but that doesn't mean he's relevant. Unfortunately, for the last month since he's been champion, he's been in the middle of nowhere. And Sami Zayn on the same track. They have paralleled them one another on a spiral downward very quickly. So when Sami Zayn aligned himself with Shinsuke, there is something here. And I mean, there is something that can be very unique. It's not a pairing anybody ever expected to happen. We all remember their 2016 encounter, one of the most just, I would say, intriguing matches that we've seen. I mean, it stands up in any generation. The match that Sami Zayn and Shinsuke Nakamura had at the NXT TakeOver show. So, yeah, there's a little history there. But these two right now are, I think, peanut butter and jelly. They both need one another to stay relevant. I think that this could be a future tag team. It could be future tag team champions. I understand that Shinsuke is the Intercontinental Champion, but right now we have a double champion on Raw and Seth Rollins, who's Universal and Tag Team Champion as well. So that doesn't automatically exclude them from that piece of the puzzle. So I'm good with this. I think they need each other, and I'm totally fine with Sami being the mouthpiece for Shinsuke, who is beyond limited in his English. There were times where he would cut promos and you'd have to sift through to understand what he's saying, and I don't want to have to do that. So if Sami's his mouthpiece, I'm totally fine. They are both masterful in the ring. This could be a very successful and overachieving tag team.
Yeah, and I think that the reason I like it the most is because when Nakamura was coming up, I have a lot of buddies who follow New Japan or NXT, and there was just so much hype, whether it be from just the regular audience or from my close friends, about Nakamura. He's this, he's that, he's going to be great. And I really tried to get behind him, but as you mentioned, you had to sift through his interviews, and it was broken and kind of a different character that I don't think translated as well to the main roster, maybe due to that language barrier. He had the, me no speaking English that worked for a couple of months, but I think that this will bring a new dimension to his character, because Sami Zayn, who in my opinion is one of the best talkers in WWE right now, can completely get Nakamura's point across. We will know what Nakamura's motives are. he just won't come around and start Kinshasa everyone and then say that he can't speak English or point at things or make these facial expressions, which I like, but they only go so far. So I really think that this could allow Nakamura to maybe realize that true potential even as a singles competitor. And I've said this before about Sami Zayn, that although I don't like that he cannot win a match to save his life, I'd rather him be an annoying mouthpiece than not be on television, sorry about that, at all. So if this is just a way for Sami Zayn to be constantly on TV in a relevant role, even if it's just him being the mouthpiece for Nakamura and they don't necessarily become a tag team and it just elevates Nakamura's singles run, I'm okay with that too. Either way you slice it, I'm so here for this tag team, and I'm really happy that they put it together.
And I don't know what the long-term plans are in terms of the creative for these two. I would assume it's probably somewhere floating in the mid-card. And my estimation is that I think these two could overachieve. Going back to my point a few minutes ago, while the creative may dictate that they're going to be in the middle of the card, floating around, maybe occasionally challenging for the tag team championships, I think that these two, if they put their all in the ring and on the mic and get involved with the creative and care, I think that these two could be a bigger deal than WWE has them booked on paper right now. They both are veterans. They both are insanely skilled in the ring. I think Sami Zayn is one of the most underrated promos in WWE today. And it's a shame that they have just put him on a downward spiral, jobbing out week after week after week. I went back and looked at the statistics since Sami Zayn returned, and he has won one match since he returned. One, and it was in a tag team with Kevin Owens. So it's a sad state of affairs for Sami, and I'm glad they addressed that too on SmackDown Live, that, hey, I have been losing and losing and losing, and I'm glad he addressed that, and so it's up front, and it's not just supposed to be forgotten. I like that. And right now, I think these two could go on a tear. Again, there's a long way to go to determine whether or not this is going to work, but I'm feeling pretty good about this because it's such a different pairing, a different feeling, and two ultra-talented individuals who have been given the shaft in the booking department for a long time now.
Yeah, well, that's it. And another thing that I really liked is that you could see, and maybe this is a lot to do with Paul Heyman on Raw, that a lot of misused guys are getting good times on television now. Like we saw Braun Strowman. He went from not even being on the SummerSlam card to winning the tag team titles. Cedric Alexander's showing up more. I've seen a lot of Apollo Crews, yeah, him too. And I just like that they're utilizing, because there's a lot of toys in the toy chest here that WWE, whether you like them or not, these certain characters are very talented guys that WWE just hasn't used, because we talked about at length with the wildcard rule. It was kind of Shane McMahon, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, Drew McIntyre, rinse, repeat, Raw, and SmackDown every week. But one thing that I really liked on Raw especially is that, have you realized it's just kind of like match after match after match after 5-minute promo, match, 5-minute promo, match. Like I feel like Raw for so many years was just open with a lengthy promo, sometimes up to half an hour, and then you finally get going. And now it's like right out of the gate you get into these matches, and I think that's one of the big reasons why these wrestlers are getting exposure.
And think about that's a good observation. And does that have something to do with Paul Heyman? I think so. And I didn't expect an overnight change when Paul Heyman took the throne. And I was concerned whether or not he would actually have true stroke, because ultimately the filter ends with Vince. So no matter who they put in charge of the Raw brand and SmackDown brand, if Vince McMahon has the final say, then it won't really matter who they put in those positions. But it does indeed look like Vince McMahon has stepped back a bit. Obviously, the XFL is becoming front and center for him. He's only one guy. As much as he may deem himself to be inhuman or some kind of superhero, he's not. And he can only deal with 24 hours a day, just like the rest of us. So I think he indeed is stepping back just a bit, and it's being reflected in small things on Raw. It's not a major overhaul. Maybe it's a camera angle here, a shorter promo there, a less scripted feel in certain promos. It just has certain, like a bunch of little things that add up to a totality of a different feeling of a show, which is the smart business way to do it. You don't blow up your model. And that is what I think is happening right now. And as you mentioned, one of the things, too, is, hey, let's put more wrestling on our wrestling show. And that's what they're doing, and it's making the show not feel like it's dragging. It's allowing us to be entertained in the way that we are expecting to be during a wrestling show. So, that to me, yes, you need promo, you need a little filler. That's just the pacing of any show, TV, movie, whatever. You need those breaks, but ultimately, you need to give the fans what they're here for, and that's professional wrestling.
And that's just it, because now the wrestlers are telling the stories in the ring. Like, it's not just like, like we would joke about kind of like some people would just bump into someone in backstage and then all of a sudden they're in a match. And then like that, we have to kind of build off that story of just bumping into someone backstage. No, now the story's being told in the ring. And just something that took place on Raw that I thought that I wouldn't like, but after seeing it, I really did enjoy it, was the OC dropping the tag team titles to Braun and Seth. I really like the OC, and I was hoping that they would get a more relevant and lengthy run. But I like it because you could see the storytelling being told between all four superstars. I love that Braun is right back in the thick of things. Obviously, you can see that they're probably segueing towards a Braun and Seth match for the title while involving AJ Styles and the Good Brothers. And I just feel like a lot more superstars are being used right in the thick of it. Just even the reintroduction of the King of the Ring. Again, I don't like the fact that they're still mishmashing Raw and SmackDown, but hey, I got to take the good with the bad here. They're using superstars who had been taking the back seat for a long list of months before this, and now you're seeing guys, like you mentioned, like Andrade and Apollo Crews. Like, when do you think we would have seen a Chad Gable versus Shelton Benjamin match, or even a feud? But it's because they're concentrating more on the wrestling and less on just the backstage nonsense. More like, you know how long it's been since I've seen like a conga line of No Way Jose like dancing through backstage just for cheap comedy? No, because they're replacing it with good matches and good quality matches that I feel like before this power shift to Paul Heyman and or Eric Bischoff, we wouldn't have seen.
And there's a lack of the heel authority figure, which I mentioned in last night's show, but it makes such a difference when the show is not focused on the authority figure, good or bad, but particularly and specifically the heel authority figure that has been going on for decades now, literally decades. And that is certainly run its course. I know Shane McMahon is still the heel authority figure on SmackDown, but even that is limited in its volume of the show compared to what it was just a month ago. So that is also a key factor too. And you're right, the conga lines and the eye-rolling Vince McMahon, I froze my brain at 14 years old humor it's much more minimal. It has not reared its ugly head in a number of weeks now, and that makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference. Yeah, so you're right. I mean, this overall product right now, it is not drastically different, but it is progressing slowly, and I think that's the way that it needs to continue. And so that's my thought on the overall product right now. And so far, the report card that we can check off for Eric Bischoff and Paul Heyman is, at least in my estimation, again, it's only been about a month. I would say that so far so good. I'd give them a B plus rating. I mean, what more could you expect at this point?
Yeah, well, in terms of how the shows are being run, I've seen more change in Raw, but I've also enjoyed SmackDown too. The only thing, and I guess maybe I could pick up a bit from where we left off 3 weeks ago, that, I don't know, like, I've just lost so much interest, is like, I just want to see Kofi Kingston get his head kicked in. Like, I can't, I'm just so over it. Maybe after we kind of went down that rabbit hole on the last time we spoke, it's been more glaring to me. But there's just nothing about this guy that I'm drawn to. And I think the fire isn't burning anymore. I think people are maybe now starting to get a bit over it, kind of like where we're at. But I don't know, like I've liked that they kind of brought the Revival in and to align with Randy Orton. It's brought like a breath of fresh air, and I think Randy Orton has been incredible here. So kudos to Randy Orton. I love how he's kind of brought back like the sadistic side of him, like making Kofi watch the Revival stomp on Xavier's knee. But as far as Kofi goes, like even when he got the one up on Randy and hit the Trouble in Paradise, I'm just so ready for it to be over, and I'm just not sure when they're going to pull the plug on it, but I'm just so done with Kofi as champion because I feel as though I don't care about the WWE Championship, and that's not a way I want to feel. But right now, I don't even think of that belt because it's not even involved in the main parts of the show, I find, anymore. Like, we saw Kofi open the show, and then I don't know. I just feel like at this point, Kofi's kind of hurting that belt.
And it is a sad thing to think about. And, last night I had another co-host on, Mary, and, I had to bite my tongue because I didn't want to get in a huge debate about Kofi Kingston, and she loves him. And she said, he's very organic, he's believable, he's easy to get behind, all these things. And like I didn't disagree with that from the perspective of, during the Elimination Chamber I got behind him because it was a very unexpected time for that to happen. He was the good soldier, and it's a nice story that people can relate to, all that. But I just kind of nodded along, and I didn't, I stood by my guns, but I just nodded along, and I didn't, we just moved on to the next topic. And it's hard to talk to somebody who loves Kofi Kingston and to dictate why we don't like him to people that do. And you know what? It's not even that I don't like him. He's not a guy that I'm going to go to an event and boo, because he's a very talented wrestler. There's no question about that. He's entertaining in the New Day. But I'm sorry, he belongs in the New Day. And more importantly, as you said, he is making that WWE Championship disappear from my thoughts. And that is terrible to think about. Think about the lineage of that belt. And Kofi Kingston, whether it's partially due to him, partially due to creative, both of them, I don't know. It could be maybe things I'm not even thinking about, but he is making this belt just invisible. Like when he comes out with that belt, I'm just like, oh, that's right, he's champion. And I don't feel as if he's adding to the belt. I feel like he's just kind of holding it because the fans were so behind him going into WrestleMania. It's like it's just kind of a look what we did type of deal, rather than let's elevate this belt. And they have certainly given it a try, and I was willing to give Kofi Kingston as WWE champion a try, because certainly it's new. He's been there 11 years, and it was a feel good story. So I was like, you know what, let's see where this goes. And I feel like I'm fighting myself every single time I see him to go, like I just can't get behind him, and I just can't. And so yes, I am ready for him to be RKO'd into oblivion.
And it's not just Kofi Kingston, because I feel any time that a championship, a world championship, is won based on the back of a feel-good story, it has to be short and sweet. And the two that come to my mind are 2004, Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit. Eddie Guerrero, who saw him winning the WWE Championship at No Way Out 2004, beating Brock Lesnar. Obviously, I was 10, so maybe I didn't have the know or the wherewithal to think about it. But I didn't see it coming, and it was great. And I will forever remember his WWE Championship reign. But it went on from No Way Out in February to the Great American Bash in June. It was short and sweet. Why? Because it was a feel-good story. It came out of nowhere. It's not supposed to last long, because on the grounds the story was based, it isn't overly believable that he could just become a superhuman and beat everyone. Before that, the best championship that Guerrero had won was the United States Championship, which he had only won once. So would it be like logical to think that Eddie Guerrero would be able to run through everyone and become unbeatable like Kofi Kingston has? No, it wasn't, because he wasn't that. He got on a hot streak and he took it to the house. You know, it happens in every sport that an underdog goes on a hot streak or gets lucky once. Like Greece won the Euro Cup in 2004, but it will never happen again. And it was one and done. Same with Chris Benoit that same year. He won the Royal Rumble. He made this historic run, won the World Heavyweight Championship, his one and only world title victory, and he dropped it at SummerSlam to Randy Orton, and then he went back to the mid-card. Does that mean I didn't like Chris Benoit as a wrestler? I'll just quantify that because we know what he did to end his life and everything in that tragedy. But as a wrestler, I loved Chris Benoit as an upper mid-card guy. But would I have been okay with him nowadays, you know, holding the world title for months on end and being unbeatable? No, because it's not believable. Guerrero and Benoit built their careers on being mid-card guys. And while it's reasonable and believable for them to have one world title victory and go on a hot streak for a few months, it wouldn't make sense for them to become unbeatable and the absolute very best like Kofi has now.
Maybe that is part of it too that I didn't really consider it, is Kofi Kingston is right now being booked as Superman. I mean, you know, he has his challenges, but ultimately, you know, he's just going to overcome and overcome and overcome. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't even think Kofi Kingston has lost a non-title match since he won the WWE Championship. And I don't like all of a sudden he just found it and that he can beat anyone at any time. And he's suddenly, you know, Stone Cold Steve Austin and nobody can beat him without cheating. I mean, I just, it's very hard to believe when he goes from 11 years of mediocrity and, you know, some occasionally 50-50 booking and, you know, going on losing streaks, going on, you know, hot streaks. But all of a sudden he's on what, like a 4.5 month unbeaten streak. And no matter who you put in front of him, Trouble in Paradise is going to put them down. I'm having a hard time with that. I'm really struggling with the fact that Kofi Kingston is this Superman all of a sudden. And you know what? If creative were sitting in front of us and they were explaining to us why they did what they did, they would point the finger at the fans and say, you know, you guys told us this is what you wanted. And you know what? The majority of fans did. And while I wasn't 100%, you know, going bonkers for it, I was in support of it to say, hey, let's see where it goes. But you know, like you said, this fairy tale can't last forever, and I don't know why it's still going on. And we've outlined the reasons last time why we think it might be. But like you said with Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit, I was there at WrestleMania 20 when they had the hug at the end of the match. And two guys that were never, ever, ever meant to be world champions were in the middle of the ring on the 20th anniversary of WrestleMania, embracing each other. Two guys that I'm sure Vince McMahon cringed at making his main event lasting match or lasting image of two guys that are 5'10" and embracing each other in the middle of the ring. And I remember that moment. I'll never forget it. And Eddie Guerrero, I mean, I could do, you know, an entire week on Eddie Guerrero and how just incredibly talented he is. And Chris Benoit, too. Yes, Chris Benoit had his tragedy, and so I'm separating the tragedy from the wrestler. The wrestler, Chris Benoit, might be one of the best, if not one of the top three best wrestlers I've ever seen. And the way he would tell stories, how snug he was in the ring. You weren't able to see through his work. All of that. But both of them were feel-good stories. Kofi Kingston is a feel-good story that is more than overstayed its welcome. And I don't look forward to seeing the WWE champion, and it's a damn shame.
Well, that's it. And you said something there, like how most of the fans got behind this. And we're in the minority here, and I understand that. But just to quantify it a bit, like, look at a guy like Seth Rollins. Like, again, I'm in the minority. I'm not the biggest Seth Rollins fan. I liked him more when he was heel and when he first turned babyface. I find this new Seth Rollins is very John Cena-esque. I don't know why, but I get a very big John Cena vibe from him. Like, his attitude, and he'll fight anyone, and he's all standing for good and whatever. But even though I'm not the biggest Seth Rollins fan, look at the build up to his now reign as the face of Raw and Universal Champion. WrestleMania 34, he won the Intercontinental Championship. He spent pretty much the vast majority of 2018 making that belt, taking it center stage. He had that lengthy feud with Dolph Ziggler, and then the Shield reunited to fight Braun and McIntyre and Ziggler. Then he had the feud with Dean Ambrose, and then he won the Royal Rumble. And it was like this slow, believable build where he got traction and he showed what he could do. And not to mention the past before this Universal Championship reign. He was a former 2-time world champion. So what I'm getting at here is that it's not just because I don't like Kofi Kingston. Because like I just said, I'm not the biggest Seth Rollins guy, but I like him as the champion. Why? Because it's believable. They built him properly. It's not just a fairy tale that he caught lightning in a bottle. No, Seth Rollins took a year being in the upper mid card and feuding over the Intercontinental Championships and having important feud after important feud, then winning the Royal Rumble and proving all this to make me believe, like, yes, this guy is a bona fide top end talent, whether I like him or not. Ditto for John Cena. Many people did not like John Cena, but I would find it very hard to find someone who didn't at least acknowledge how good of a wrestler and how believable he was as a top contender. So it's not like Rollins came out of nowhere like Kofi Kingston did. Kofi Kingston didn't have a slow build. He had a 4-week-long mega push, and then he's become Superman overnight. And that's where my problem is with Kofi. It's not just because I don't like the character.
And it reminds me, too, a little bit of, to some extent, I know there's not a whole lot of parallels here, but with Roman Reigns and a lot of the reasons why the fans rejected him and a large base rejected him is because there was no incremental steps. There was no logical progression of his ascent. It was just Shield. Okay, the Shield disbands, straight to the main event. And there was no paying your dues in front of the fans, and it was very obvious of who they were selecting when the fans were saying, no, we don't want this guy right now, we want Daniel Bryan. And so Daniel Bryan, who looked like the ultimate common man and could cut a good promo and was incredible in the ring, was the fan favorite. And he wasn't supposed to be. And Vince McMahon, to this day, is still pushing Roman Reigns as their top guy, even if he doesn't have the belt. And I said this last time, too. I think that no matter who has the belt, it still feels as if all roads lead to Roman Reigns. No matter what he's doing, it's just a distraction from, okay, well, we're going to make them think that Roman Reigns is not in the title picture. So when he gets to there finally, they'll forget all the things that he wasn't when he was champion, and all the resentment will go away because he's been out of the title picture for so long. And but the thing is, he's not in the title picture, but he is still at the beginning of Raw. He's the beginning of Raw. He's the end of Raw. He's the beginning of SmackDown oftentimes, and certainly has been the final image of SmackDown for the last minute of the show that they just have to squeak in there to make sure that he is the lasting image of the show. So it still tells me he is the focal point of the brand. So, but yeah, your point about Rollins as a heel, I am a Seth Rollins fan. Do I support him more than I support Kofi Kingston? Abso-freaking-lutely. I think he's a much better champion. He's much more credible. He has paid his dues. He can go. He can cut a good promo. Do I like the Wii stuff and like you said, he's kind of the 19 version of say your prayers, take your vitamins. He feels a little bit too wholesome. And I don't like that part of Seth Rollins where he feels too family friendly, like he could babysit your kids. Like I don't want to feel that with Seth Rollins. I don't need somebody. That's not what gets guys super over in 2019, even with a PG product. So I don't like the Wii stuff. I still believe Seth Rollins is a much better heel than he is a babyface, but I still think that he's passable as a face. I'm accepting him as a babyface, where I don't accept Kofi Kingston as the WWE champion.
And you brought up Roman Reigns ending SmackDown. And I think that in some way WWE knows that Kofi doesn't have the star power to carry SmackDown on his own. Because, like I said, he gave Orton the Trouble in Paradise, and then that's it. And don't get me wrong, like, I like the feud, and I've always been a Randy Orton guy, and I've liked what he's done in this program, but it feels like there should be a feud over, like, the U.S. title or something. Like, it doesn't have that star power. Like, I'm not looking for, like you said before, I don't look forward to seeing Kofi Kingston. Like, when he comes out, I get upset because I'm not entertained when I see him, and B, I see the belt around him. And it's gotten to a point now where I'm just like, wow, they made this belt irrelevant. And maybe it's because I remember 2 years ago when they put it on Jinder Mahal. But, AJ Styles, I found, had to do a lot of work to reestablish that belt because it took a hit for Jinder Mahal. And AJ held it for almost a year on the dot. Then Daniel Bryan had an excellent heel run with it. And I was also really disappointed that Daniel Bryan just got brushed to the side because I loved him as champion. And now it just feels like it's right back with an uncredible guy. And I don't know the motive behind, well, we went over it and we know that most of the crowd is still behind Kofi. But it's just crazy to me that, like, even the writing of the shows itself shows that the WWE titles take a backseat to whoever tacked Roman Reigns. Like, really? Is that where we're at now? Where whoever attacked Roman Reigns is ahead of the WWE Championship? But on the same level, I care more about the Roman Reigns attacker because I don't care about Kofi Kingston. And that's the point that really bothers me, is that I've gotten to this stage of mine now where I'd rather just not see the biggest championship in WWE on television because I just can't believe who's holding it.
I'm deeply disturbed by the fact, when I sit and think about the fact that this championship and all of that comes with it, and guys that have bled and sweat and told us that this is their life, and the guys that have held it. I don't need to go through the list. You guys know any big name that's ever come through WWE ever has held that championship. And then you go, yes, Jinder Mahal did some damage. Even as bad as Jinder Mahal was, I still was willing, as much of as I said it was going to be a disaster, I was still willing to say, okay, let's see where this goes. This can't just be because they're going to India, with their overseas tour, and which is exactly what it was. But nonetheless, I was willing to say, let's just see what he's got. Do I think it's as bad as it was, and do I think the championship is as devalued as it was with Jinder Mahal? I don't, because Jinder Mahal went from complete obscurity in the three-man band and jobbing out every night to WWE champion. It was just done for the shock value and to make sure that their India audience had somebody to cheer for and make sure that their mission statement of putting smiles on people's faces was achieved by putting the championship on Jinder Mahal. And so it's not as tragic as it was with Jinder because of how defined down he was, whereas Kofi's just been floating in the mid-card, and he's a good high flyer. He's great for TLC matches and ladder matches and cage matches, and he's going to put on a quality match. He can work with anybody. He can make anybody look good. That's a very, very good traits to have, but he just simply isn't WWE champion. And just to briefly touch on why, I think the New Day has a lot to do with it, a lot to do with why we resent him as champion, is because New Day represents oftentimes, terrible comedy. They are the embodiment of the soft PG era. They're very one-dimensional. They have oftentimes completely taken away from what's going on in the ring when they're on commentary, when there's a serious segment. They did it during the Shawn Michaels Dolph segment a few weeks ago. They're all about jokes and pancakes, and they're not about ever taking something seriously when it needs to be. And I think that's a piece of why I really resent Kofi as champion right now.
Well, because I think back to when I was growing up watching wrestling. Was there ever a time that, let's say, on Monday Night Raw, when I was more excited to see the Intercontinental Champion than the World Heavyweight Champion? Or on SmackDown, was I ever thinking that the United States Championship felt more than the WWE Championship? Never. Not even once was that thought even close. But this is why. WWE, for some reason now, has this mythology in their head, and we spoke about it a few weeks ago, that to appease fans, they'll stick the belt on someone. And, okay, well, now you can't be mad at us because the belt is on them. Well, that's not how it works. We talked about how Finn Balor was as irrelevant as they came as soon as became Intercontinental Champion. And look at AJ Styles. AJ Styles has made that U.S. title front and center on almost every Monday Night Raw. And you know what? I love it. I love him as U.S. champion. I love him in the OC. He makes that belt feel important. But it should not feel more important than the WWE Championship. And that's because Kofi won that title based on no grounds. It was a Cinderella story. And you know what? Like I said, in all of sports, sometimes the underdog achieves. And it will happen, but it should not go on for this long. You know, if Kofi had won the belt, won a pay-per-view match or two, but then dropped it by June, I probably wouldn't have batted an eye. You know, it's a 2-month run. He got his kick at the can. He got rewarded for all the years. And, you know, good night, the lights. That's it. But this, like, overnight transformation into, like, this superhero, you know, it's like as if the Cleveland Browns became the New England Patriots overnight. You know, it just doesn't happen. There has to be a slow, methodical build. You have to build your team, and you have to build a character. And that's where it's just not believable to me. Because I know it's entertainment, we know that it's scripted and everything, but I want to be emotionally invested into these stories. And how can I be emotionally invested when a lot of it doesn't make sense? And as I mentioned before, it's as if the creative knows that Kofi doesn't really fit as champion. Why? Because look at who's ending the shows. Roman Reigns trying to figure out who pushed him over. Or on Raw, the U.S. title has main evented Raw more times than the WWE title has main evented SmackDown. That's what doesn't make sense to me. And, you know, when Kofi's only claim to fame on SmackDown is opening the show and blindsiding Randy Orton, it doesn't make the title feel that important.
And for years, I mean, we all know the infamous 11 years that have been told to us over and over and over. And yes, he's been here for 11 years plus now. But during those 11 years, before Elimination Chamber ever was a twinkle in our eye, I never once said to myself, oh man, he'd be a great WWE champion. I wish they'd push him more. I never felt that way ever. And look, I was entertained by his matches. Was I ever super emotionally invested? Maybe once every few years. I never ever said to myself, oh man, he's getting the shaft. This isn't fair. I never felt Daniel Bryan syndrome with him, that he's being overlooked. I just said, cool, he's found his place. He is a great in-ring performer that knows how to make people look good, and he can wrestle his ass off. Great. And that's a great thing to be and do. And you have found your niche inside of the mid-card and occasionally touching the upper card, maybe as a part of a fatal four-way or triple threat, but never really winning the big one. And that's okay. That's okay because not everybody belongs there. He got lucky on a whim, on a feel-good moment when Daniel Bryan, who needs to be credited just as much as Kofi does for this, because Daniel Bryan did his part by being such a good heel champion that you wanted to see him get dethroned. And Kofi was just there by happenstance because of an injury to Ali, which was credited to Randy Orton, and he was in the right place at the right time. And it just happened to be, oh, well, we have a good backstory to tell here. You know, Kofi's never been champion. Let's get behind. That'd be kind of cool, right? That'd be unexpected. So the fans got behind him because he put on a good performance, and you said, oh my God, Kofi can actually win. So it felt like it could be one of those moments that WWE always talks about. But then it just kind of just kept rolling from there, and WWE capitalized, and the fans ate it up. And I'm sitting there going, meh, okay, if he wins, great. I just hope it doesn't last long. It's just I never felt that way with Kofi, that there was this groundswell of, oh, my God, this is just so unfair to Kofi. I can't wait till he's champion one day.
And one thing about this that, and I always come back to, like how much the belts mean, and I've gone over and over and over again that I like to keep the value of the belts. But not everyone should get a chance with the belt. Like, it almost feels like, okay, well, you've been here long enough, so here's your turn with it. No, like, a lot of people like crap all over this time in WWE, and they call it like the Triple H Reign of Terror. But like, from let's say the years 2002 to 2005, when the World Heavyweight title was the World Championship of Monday Night Raw before the Universal Championship existed, more times than not, Triple H had that. And it wasn't like everyone was getting their turn with it. It was that who was good enough and worthy enough to be that champion. Triple H was a bona fide guy. And I'm sorry, but it made that belt feel a hell of a lot more valuable when Triple H was holding it. Why? Because it wasn't just random guys like upper mid-card guys that, let's say Christian getting their chance with the World Heavyweight title. I know that he eventually got it down the road, which another guy that probably shouldn't have, but we won't go down that road. But back in 2004, 2005, guys like Christian or even before, Chris Jericho for the most part, they didn't get up to that main event scene because not everyone has to be part of the elite status. Not everyone has to have their turn as the main event guy, even if you have been here for over 10 years. But that's why the belt is special, because only the elite of the elite have won it. Like, look at some of the names who have never won the WWE Championship, like Roddy Piper. Never won the WWE Championship. Does that make him not good? No, but he was never part of the elite group, and that's okay. But, in the Attitude Era, it was Rock, it was Austin, it was Triple H, it was Taker. Look at Kane and The Big Show. That they had, one WWE Championship apiece during the Attitude Era, and Kane's title victory lasted a day when Steve Austin beat him for the next day on Raw. But Kane was a staple of WWE for almost 2 decades, but he was never part of that elite class. And that's okay. And it just bothers me now that they have to give everyone, their turn. And I could just use the Universal Championship as an example. Like, everyone craps all over the fact that Brock had it for, 3 times for a combined reign of almost 2 years. But in my opinion, that makes the title feel worth something. It makes it feel that not everyone can get this. You have to be the best of the best to take it away from Brock. And in its 3-year existence, there's been, 5 champions in total? And it feels like the WWE Championship on SmackDown just gets passed along to whoever WWE thinks is the flavor of the week at that time.
And I think you hit on something there, that WWE has to be a hierarchy, just like any other simulated or any other sport. And now we're looking at a simulated sport. You have to have a hierarchy. You can't have everybody on a level playing field, which oftentimes is the case, that we're meant to believe everyone's on a level playing field. Anyone can beat anyone on any given night. That's a bunch of nonsense. It's a bunch of nonsense. It's garbage that I'm supposed to believe that. Take a look at any match that's happened. Just pick a match out of the hat over the last year, and it's always about, even though they lost, they took that person to the limit. Well, why? Why does it always have to be that person was just able to scrape by, but they took them to the limit? No. You need squash matches sometimes. You need matches to not just follow the same pacing that happens all the time. You know how matches are structured. It's just the WWE flavor of how they present matches. It's the babyface, takes over the beginning of the match. The heel then takes over. There's a couple of hope spots, a false finish, and then the actual finish. I mean, with the babyface going over if there's no interference or heel tactics that end up playing a part. It's just the same formula for matches that I think need to change. And like you said too about everybody having to get a chance, no. And there is no bigger and more prominent example of that than WrestleMania. Why does WrestleMania, their Super Bowl as they like to label it as, have to have everybody get a participation ribbon? Why? It makes the show longer, which I just would assume that they're trying to get their network numbers up to make sure that, they can tell Wall Street everybody's watching the network X number of hours. It's just it's a false inflation of what's truly relevant to the fans. And yes, they're going to watch WrestleMania because it's Wrestle Freaking Mania, but I don't need everyone getting a participation award on WrestleMania. If it's the Super Bowl and you want to compare it to the actual Super Bowl, are the teams that didn't make it playing? in the Super Bowl? No. You have the two best teams from each conference playing in the Super Bowl. You don't have the other teams on the sidelines getting, well, okay, guys, your turn, get on the field. You didn't win, you didn't even make the playoffs, but come on, get on the field. It's ridiculous. I don't need that. WrestleMania used to feel so much more special when it was just the elite of the elite. You earned your place on the card. You didn't just get a spot because you got a jersey, so come on over. I mean, there's no better example, I think, than that.
And that's just it. And I want the title to mean something. And when a guy who, for the most part, has been, I would even say, a low mid-carder, holds this title, and not only did he win it, but he's held it for as long as he has. And I don't mind the long title reigns, but it has to make sense. Like, Becky Lynch holding this title. She's in the same boat as Seth Rollins for me. Am I the biggest Becky Lynch fan? No, I find her character obnoxious and annoying, but they built it properly, so at least I can believe in it. That's the thing for me, is that it's like not everyone is going to like every character, but you have to make it make sense. Like even let's say Ember Moon, that she lost to Bayley at SummerSlam. I like Ember Moon, and I'm kind of over the whole Bayley character. But would it have made sense for Ember Moon to take that title away from Bayley on her first chance? Not really, no. Because last time I checked, Ember Moon didn't even qualify for that match via winning a number one contenders match. Bayley just picked her. Am I right with that, Matt?
Yeah, you're correct. She just stood there and she was asked by, I think, Charlie Caruso or whoever was interviewing her that, have you decided on a SummerSlam opponent? And Bayley stood there after she won the tag team match with Ember Moon and said, I'm looking for somebody with charisma, with drive, all these nonsensical, non-qualifying factors for who you would actually be choosing. And first of all, I don't even know why she gets to choose and why there's no tournament or number one contenders match. But her promo saying that I need somebody with charisma, and it just happens to be Ember Moon standing next to her. It was eye-rolling of how Ember Moon was chosen. So
there's a point. So just so people can't say, well, you don't like Kofi Kingston, that's why you're crapping over his run. Well, no. It's because look at someone like Ember Moon, who I like and I've always liked. But it would not have made sense for her to win the championship because the build made no sense. And besides that little bit of shock value, it would, people wouldn't have gotten down with that storyline. So where I'm at here, and you touched on something there about the Ember Moon thing, is where do champions get off choosing their opponents? Seth said that on Raw, to Braun, I think nobody's more deserving than you. Well, since when? And again, that's not believable. And that's kind of the thing with Seth that, I kind of have trouble with. Who would voluntarily fight Braun Strowman? Honestly, I don't care how good you are, and I don't care that you just beat Brock Lesnar. Who would voluntarily put your title up against Braun Strowman?
Yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, this is where the whole John Cena-esque vibe comes in, where Cena was the fighting champion, put it up against anybody, all this stuff. If you want some, come get some garbage. That's exactly what is happening here. And, the logic is if you're a babyface, you're a fighting champion. You'll fight anyone at any time. And when you're a heel, you shy away from championship matches. You hide. You try to avoid having to face anybody and just cocoon the championship. I mean, I know the logic and the psychology, the human psychology behind all of those traits and undesirable traits, but it's the same formula, and it makes the babyface look like an idiot. Why would you want to put yourself on the line against Braun Strowman, who's 3 times your size? You could say, well, it's just to, prove that he wants to fight the best of the best, just as Becky said she wants to fight the best of the best. And but still, if the most important thing in your life is being the Universal Champion or any champion, why would you voluntarily put it on the line against somebody who has a very good chance of beating you? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
But again, so I'm going to try and, counter it with some positive, because I am really happy that Braun Strowman's back in the main title picture, because besides Brock, for the most part, Seth's challenger since WrestleMania was Baron Corbin. that lasted a grand total of 3 pay-per-views, I believe. So although I didn't really understand the storyline because of like logically, like we just went over, who would voluntarily want to fight Braun Strowman, I'm really happy at pushing Braun Strowman back into the main event picture. And I really do like what they did with the tag team titles, them winning it, because I remember John Cena and Shawn Michaels actually main evented WrestleMania against each other while being tag team champions at WrestleMania 23, which was a phenomenal match, and I recommend anyone to go watch it. But I like the dynamic that they're putting with Braun and Seth. I think eventually one of them is going to crack on the other. And I would, if I had to take a guess at it, an early prediction, they're going to have a match against each other at Clash of Champions and defend the tag team titles against the OC. But again, besides that little tidbit about Seth voluntarily wanting to fight Braun, I really like where they're headed with this. And I think Braun's a really, like the perfect challenger.
I'm glad you put a positive spin on that, because I was heading down a rabbit hole of negativity. So thank you. But I'm glad, yes. So Braun Strowman being relevant again, and being not just relevant, but in a big-time storyline, one of the biggest focal points of Raw. Yes, he was really starting to lose his footing for a while after being pulled last second from the championship match against Brock Lesnar, doing where I think was really spiraling down when he was being the bully to Kevin Owens, who really had really no reason to beat up on him. That was just awful. He turned heel randomly with Drew McIntyre and then flipped back against the Shield. It was just here and there and up and down, and he was losing his footing. And now he's starting to bring it back and center himself, and he has something to sink his teeth into. And so yes, I'm totally fine with them being Raw Tag Team Champions. I was looking forward to a long run with the OC as well, but that doesn't mean that putting the belts on Seth and Strowman wouldn't have added value to the Raw Tag Team Championships, which also desperately needed after they unfortunately started to wither away on the shoulders of the Revival. Although now they seem to also be finding their footing with Randy Orton too, which I really like, and I hope it's a faction that continues. I know I'm going off topic here, but as I think about the potential faction with Randy and the Revival, that could be a new stable that is not only good for obviously giving the rub to Dash and Dawson, but also giving Randy Orton something new to do by running a stable. And if you're a heel, you need heaters. You need guys to take your bumps and do the dirty work. And Randy Orton is, of course, a better heel than a face. He's made it publicly known on several interviews that he'd rather be a heel than a face. So that I'm glad that while Dash and Dawson have really, it fell kind of through the rabbit hole after winning the tag team titles, and so did the tag team titles, they have found a home, hopefully a longer term home with Randy Orton. So I'm also liking that as well.
Well, Dash and Dawson are similar guys to Nakamura in the sense that when they came up, it was almost like I felt obligated to get behind them because they were an old school tag team and, really good in the ring. But I was just like, who are these guys? It's like you just pulled off 2 construction workers off the highway and stuck them in a ring. Like, that's the way I felt about them. But again, they were really good in-ring workers, so I always tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. But being aligned with Randy, it's kind of given them a purpose, even more so than when they were the Raw Tag Team Champions. And like you said, the heel is always better when he has henchmen with him. Triple H with Evolution. Even JBL, who was another one of those champions who came out of nowhere, but the faction behind him and him getting Weasley wins made him who he was. Randy Orton 10, 11 years ago with Legacy, the same kind of formula. And it's one of these things that I found WWE has lacked lately. I saw that they've done it. They went back to with Daniel Bryan with Rowan and Jinder Mahal with the Singh brothers. But, Brock was a one-man show, and Kevin Owens was a one-man show when he was Universal Champion. AJ Styles when he was the heel champion on SmackDown 3 years ago, or whatever it was. You could always find a way to not only make lower card guys relevant when you align them with a top-tier heel, but it also tells a better story. It makes you hate the heel more. It kind of covers the babyface if he is to lose. But more so, like you said, I'm just glad that Dash and Dawson are getting the rub from Randy Orton, much like the OC is doing as they realign Gallows and Anderson with AJ Styles.
And Gallows and Anderson were also in the same boat. I don't think Vince McMahon has ever taken tag team wrestling seriously as oh, we got to make this great. And Triple H has been known to try to revive that too, no pun intended. And so I think there's been a little bit of a power struggle, and it's kind of the on again off again with tag teams on Raw and SmackDown. And it seems like they're going back to focusing on tag teams and the importance of tag team wrestling, which I think has been a lost art. And if they're going to indeed take this seriously, I love the Good Brothers, the OC, the original Clique, the original Clan, the original Club, whatever the hell you want to call them. I do like where they're going with them. I don't know about Gallows' face paint. I don't know what he's supposed to be, if he's supposed to be Animal or if he's supposed to be a third member of the Ascension. I don't know what he's supposed to do with that, but he's trying to just change up his look, and I understand and respect that. But yes, it looks like tag teams and factions are the order of the day and the latest focus of WWE. But I am totally fine with that because especially factions. Factions by design are meant to create new stars. They're not to just be a forever solution to what is going on in the story. It is meant to create stars. Look at Evolution. How many stars came out of that? Yes, you could say Triple H and Flair were already big stars before that, of course. But Batista and Randy Orton were the benefactors. D-Generation X. I mean, you just look at the faction here. The corporation. Even Legacy. I mean, Evolution. There's just so many different factions that you could point to and go, yeah, that person... that guy became a big star from this. And, of course, there's some examples where they just petered out and became nothing, of course. But I'm fine with factions as long as they're meant to create new stars. And if Dash and Dawson are going to be the benefactors of Randy Orton leading the way, absolutely. And I need Randy Orton. If he's going to be a heel, I want to see guys take the bumps for him. And he comes in, and just as the babyface is getting hot, he hits him with an RKO. And no matter what position Randy Orton's in, the crowd is always going to cheer for the RKO because the RKO is bigger than any storyline that goes on because the RKO is so over. It's just stupid. And I love the way – I actually do got to give Kofi credit on this. The way he takes the RKO is brutal. The way he took the RKO on SmackDown was like – it looked like he snapped his spine. I mean, I don't know if it's meant to be like that or if it's just in the moment reaction, but I got to give Kofi the props on that. He takes the RKO like no other.
Yeah, he's a great seller. I put him right up there with Dolph Ziggler, who I found him and Roman had a really good match on Raw to open up the show. But, WWE's been filled with so many positives, and I hate to go back on Kofi here. But I guess it's because, I look at all these positives. Like, I love, where they're going with factions. And I love, where the women's division is at right now. And we'll get to Sasha Banks in a bit, but I've really liked her return lately. But then it bothers me that arguably the one and only stain on the product right now is the WWE champion. And I'm just like, you guys are getting pretty much everything else right and positives galore. But the main title and the most prestigious title and the most highly sought after title is the one that just seems irrelevant and just seems like I don't care about it and is opening up the show and taking, the finish to that match at SummerSlam, that's flat out embarrassing. Come on. It's SummerSlam. It's the WWE Championship. And I know maybe they were trying to protect Kofi from having a clean loss to Randy Orton, but they wanted the story to keep going. But I don't care how you slice it. I really did not like that finish. And it just feels like, as a whole, that this whole WWE Championship reign has kind of been half-assed.
It's just, I know, I'm trying not to go back to Kofi either. And so the last thing I'll say on this is, yeah, the SummerSlam finish pissed off a lot of people. Even the crowd was chanting BS on it. And I understand that in the first matchup of a program when it's new, you typically don't have clean finishes so that it can continue to the next pay-per-view. So I understand why they did it, but the fact is that it happened at SummerSlam, a pay-per-view where you're supposed to have clean finishes. It's the second biggest pay-per-view of the year. So, yeah, that was a bit frustrating to see. I know why they did it, but I don't agree with it. So, one thing I do want to ask you about, too, is what do you think about The Fiend? What grade would you give this character from the inception of the very first Firefly Funhouse to the latest edition of The Fiend attacking Jerry Lawler? And part two to that question, where do you think they're going with this?
Well, I would so far give it an A, and the only reason I wouldn't give it an A plus is because I feel as though that it's kind of just becoming a tad repetitive. And I don't hate it because I still love The Fiend, and every time he comes out, I get excited, and I loved his entrance at SummerSlam. It was the highlight of the show, in my opinion. I find he put on an excellent match with Balor. I love that he beat him clean. But the only reason I don't give it an A plus is because, like Jerry Lawler, he attacked and he did it with Kurt Angle. And I got to say, Jerry Lawler kind of made it funny and believable. Like, all the lights start going out and he's like, oh, no, I know where this is going. So I kind of like that because it felt very realistic, because if you've been in WWE and you've seen what's going on, when that starts happening, you're not just going to look around confused like Kurt Angle did. Like, you're going to try and get the hell out of there. But, getting back more on track here, as to where they're going with it, I'm not really sure, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Because, he took out Balor in quick fashion. He's going after every, legend that comes about, whether it be Mick Foley or Kurt Angle or Jerry Lawler. So he's clearly a heel, although he's being booked as a heel, but like one of the most over characters right now. I hope he's going for something relevant. I'm kind of hoping that he stops just attacking insert legend X, because like I said, that's getting a bit repetitive. So as for where they're going with it, I'm not entirely sure. I just hope it's something relevant. And as for the grade, I'll give it an A, and the only reason it's not an A plus is because they're kind of becoming repetitive segments.
So I'm gonna say that I'm in the same grading level as you. It's very difficult to get a storyline A plus, and that has nothing. I'm not taking anything away from WWE. I'm not taking anything away from Bray Wyatt, but to nail a storyline in perfection and execution is damn near impossible to do. So I think I'm giving them the highest grade that I realistically could, and giving them an A. I've been a fan of the Firefly Funhouse since day one, when people are going and already just going, oh my God, what are they doing with Bray Wyatt? This is terrible. Well, they've killed him and crushed his character. When in reality, his character was dead and buried before he even began the Firefly Funhouse. So I loved it from day one. And since that time, The Fiend obviously has finally debuted. He's attacking legends outside of Finn Balor. And so my estimation for where this is going, and for those of you that listened to my show last night know what I'm about to go, where I'm going with this, is I think in somehow, some way, within the next 6 months, this is going to end with The Undertaker as his opponent. Now, you may say The Undertaker, oh, he can't go. The Undertaker, they've had their match before at WrestleMania. Well, yeah, they had their match, but not what it should have been. Undertaker is limited in the ring. I think Bray Wyatt can still work with The Undertaker and make it a passable match, because this is not about putting on a 5-star classic. This is about putting on a spectacle. It's the Fiend versus the Dead Man. I think they could do a hell of a lot with that, maybe even as soon as Survivor Series, or all the way to WrestleMania. Obviously, Survivor Series is where The Undertaker debuted in 1990, so we're coming up on that nice even 30 years next year. But this could be a very big money match, and this has to go somewhere, because he's specifically attacking legends. He's not just attacking, a legend just happened to be 1 week, and then the other 4 were, active wrestlers. He's attacking legends. So that tells me it has to end with a legend that's actually going to try to put him in his place. And I see money in the Dead Man versus the Fiend. What do you think about that?
Well, I never drew that correlation that it was always legends, but now that you mention it, it would make a lot of sense, because what other legend could he possibly face? And it would make total sense to be The Undertaker. Like, I think you pointed out that next year is going to be his 30-year anniversary since debuting, and I think that it would make sense, and it would kind of bridge that gap to his final farewell match in next year's Summer Survivor Series. I think that it's a story that writes itself, not only because that they had their match in 2015 at WrestleMania 31, but now it's like this new character, and what other character is going to stand up to the Fiend than the Undertaker? Like, you know, I could already see it, like the Undertaker's in the ring, and then the lights start going out, and the Fiend pulls an Undertaker on the Undertaker. So yeah, I think that would be really brilliant, and I would like it because I don't want the Fiend to be wasted on Jobber A and Jobber B, because that's where my fear was when it started, that he would come back and, you know, attack like Apollo Crews or No Way Jose or the B Team or whatever, and then slowly but surely it would lose its initial stock value and people would stop caring about him again. But now that you bring it up that he's attacking legends, it would make sense, and I hope that they go in a direction like that because it would keep him relevant and it would be a really high-profile feud.
And people are saying, you know, and Michael Cole even alluded to the fact that people are crapping all over Undertaker, at least, you know, after, especially with his match with Goldberg, which, to Undertaker's defense, a lot of it is on Goldberg and not Undertaker, although Undertaker is not exactly super mobile and flexible in the ring and is a fraction of what he used to be, and we all understand that. But Michael Cole alluded to, after the Undertaker appeared, I think it was on Monday Night Raw, you know, how many more times are we going to see the dead man? He tried to make it real for fans that were crapping all over the Undertaker, that, you know, he is a legend. We don't know how many more times we're going to see this man, which is all true. We need to have a little perspective. We just need to accept the fact that Undertaker is not who he was, and he's not, and that's okay. And I think that once you accept that and don't hold him to the standard of 1998 or 2000, then it becomes a little bit different. He's a legacy star that you know is limited in the ring in 2019, and he is there to help make the next generation of stars. He's at the point of giving back to the business. He's no longer going to be the focal point. He's obviously not going to be champion again. That's good. He doesn't have to be. He's way beyond proving anything. He's there to give back to the business, and what better way to give back to the business than help the company build new stars? So if it is indeed Undertaker versus Bray Wyatt, which I believe, if I'm drawing the parallels correctly, and I drew the parallels to this last night too, but September 10th, the SmackDown Live that's in Madison Square Garden, Undertaker is advertised to be there. It was on WWE's website, and there's no agenda for why the Undertaker's there. And we all know when there's no agenda for a star appearing, typically that's the start of an angle. It's a start of something that, you know, there's no reason why they're there. There's got to be a start of something, and maybe it's for Bray Wyatt to interrupt him, plant the seeds, you know, attack Taker. Taker goes away for a few months, and they end up having the match at Rumble or Mania, or they could, you know, go from September to November and do it at Survivor Series. But that would, to me, be the first possible point in which you would see the Fiend interrupt the Undertaker. Would be the September 10th edition in Madison Square Garden.
You know, that now that we're talking about this, and while, you know, I think that's a very logical thing and it could easily build to WrestleMania, there's one guy that he's not a legend, but he's kind of a legacy star, is Brock Lesnar. And I remember, I think it was WrestleMania 32, where they started a feud with Bray Wyatt and Brock Lesnar, and they quickly scrapped it. And that was something that I always thought would be really cool to see and intriguing. And if it's not The Undertaker, I would really like to see The Fiend go after Brock Lesnar, because we haven't really seen Brock Lesnar as a babyface at all since he returned to WWE. And I'm not saying that he would have to fully flip, but maybe just an organic babyface turn, where, like, we kind of saw it a bit when he fought Seth 3-4 years ago, when Seth was the heel champion, where just by default, people started cheering and getting behind Brock because he was fighting a heel. I think they could have a crazy good dynamic in the ring. I think it would be cool to see how Brock would react to the Fiend's tactics. While Brock is just a straight-up smash-mouth guy, the Fiend is all this, you know, like, mind games and coming at you from behind. And I guess it's always been something that I've desired, because they kind of just brush it under the rug all those years ago. and just change directions leading to WrestleMania. But if it's not The Undertaker, I think The Fiend and Brock would be a really cool angle to go down.
That's a feud that I remember. I think it was Roadblock, the pay-per-view before WrestleMania, where they were supposed to face off, and Brock got his hands, I think, on the rest of the Wyatt family. And while Brock and Bray stared each other down, I remember Bray walking up the ramp, making eye contact with Brock, but backing off. And that was the closest they ever got to actually having an in-ring showdown. And obviously this version of Bray Wyatt is a much better version of Bray Wyatt than the riddle-speaking, lantern-carrying, Firefly. I don't know what he was. I mean, we don't know what he was. And so this is a Bray Wyatt that is infinitely better, and I think the fans would go in pretty crazy for this too. But like you said, I mean, I don't know how it would be booked in terms of face or heel. I think it could honestly go either way. The problem is that Brock Lesnar is the guy that fans view as almost an intruder now, and a guy that's there when he wants to be. Fans truly believe he doesn't want to be there, because I really believe he doesn't want to be there. And Bray Wyatt's a guy that the fans are really behind. This is one of the most interesting and cool gimmicks that WWE has had in years and years and years. I just don't see, even if you try to book Brock as a babyface against The Fiend, how you could successful do that when The Fiend has got some legitimate, true, organic support, even though he's, quote, being booked as a heel.
Yeah, and that thing that you said about Brock being an intruder, like, I'm just going to go off on a bit of a tangent here. I won't take up too much time, but I get why people hate Brock, and I get why people don't want him around, but the product is just so much better when he's around. He really is, at least in my view, like a big draw. And it's not just, like, you can't even say that, oh, well, you're just a casual fan, and that's why a lot of people think that he comes around to attract a casual fan. No, I've been an avid fan for over 20 years, and I could say that Brock is one of the most intriguing characters. I could live vicariously through him. He's believable. It's realistic. He's actually kicked ass in real cage fighting. And while I understand that people resent him because he's part-time and he carries the title and this and that, we go over it all the time. When I watch wrestling, it's sports simulation, and it's supposed to be as believable as possible. And Brock holding the title is believable. The management favoring Brock Lesnar is believable. These are all things that make sense, and anything that makes sense, I automatically get behind in some way or form. Because Brock coming in and kicking ass and doing what he does, well, sometimes it gets a bit redundant how he comes and bounces. For the most part, it's always entertaining. And look at that match he put on against Seth at SummerSlam. That was a terrific match. And I think we did a show the week before that we were talking about how ecstatic we were for this build and how well WWE had done, but they had to get this right, and it had to be a legit wrestling match, not like the Money in the Bank cash-in or that WrestleMania match when most of the fighting went down before the bell even rang. No, they had a legit match, and Brock showed that, when it's time to go, he can go with the best of them. So the whole narrative that, Brock's an intruder and he's this and he's that, you just appreciate him for what he is, because he's one of a kind, and I don't think we're ever going to see anything like Brock Lesnar ever again.
Oh, look, I totally when I said he was an intruder, I don't actually believe that he's an intruder, but he's viewed as such by fans because WWE played off of the mindset that fans have been talking about Brock Lesnar for years now. So, I mean, he returned in 2012, and so he's been with WWE part-time for 7 years now. But the idea that Brock Lesnar is this guy that doesn't want to be there, he's getting to the point of, look, he's holding the championship hostage. We never see him. He's barely there. Even the wrestlers on air in their promos would just feed into that narrative too. So, when you roll that all together, the fans actually believe this, and I think to some extent there's a little truth to that he doesn't really want to be there and he's there for the money. I mean, he's alluded to that in, I think, the Stone Cold podcast. I believe that Brock Lesnar, who we see on air, is pretty damn close to who he would be on his farm in Minnesota. I really do truly believe that. But as you said, I don't think we truly appreciate the magnitude and just how special Brock Lesnar is right now. And maybe it's because he needs just a little bit of a refresh. Maybe he just needs a little bit of a tweak in the things he does. And one of the things I said is maybe one of the things is that he needs to get a little more physical on Raw. And that has happened. So instead of just coming out and standing there and Paul Heyman cuts a promo and they go and take a flight and go back home, they just needed to change up how they're using Brock Lesnar when they're paying him millions of dollars to be there. And yes, he can still go. He can still go with anybody. He's in crazy good shape. And we just don't, I think, at times understand to the magnitude and the level of stardom and how much he actually adds to the product, regardless of how you actually feel about him. You have an opinion about him. And if you feel strongly negative about him, that's still a good thing, because that means you still want to see somebody come along and kick his ass. That's called heel heat. That's what we're still looking for. If fans start to feel indifferent and go, well, it's Brock, then you might start being in a little trouble. Indifference is the kiss of death in any professional wrestling genre. And I think that fans, while they're booing him, are booing him because of this narrative that is just swirling around of fans believing that he's an intruder and believing that he's, he doesn't want to be there. He's just holding the belt hostage, blah, blah, blah. And while it is at times annoying that he's holding the belt hostage and he's not there for sometimes a month or maybe 2 months at a time, it feels special when he's there, and he brings viewers. Viewership always goes up when he's there and on Raw. And that is, I think, how Brock Lesnar should be utilized. He doesn't need to be there every week, and that's what makes him special.
Another thing is that he's so well established that as soon as someone beats him, they automatically get a meteoric rise. And, you can see that with Seth Rollins. That pop that he got when he beat him clean. Because as we know, there were shenanigans at WrestleMania. But when he beat him clean, he finally went over. When Roman Reigns beat him last year, although there was a bit of nonsense with Braun Strowman at ringside, there was a huge pop. And that's what I like about Brock's matches, because when he loses, it's such a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's such a big shock. And it's such a catapulting moment for whoever beats him. Let's say even when Goldberg came back for his first match and beat him in under a minute and a half. That was such a big and cool moment. And while I could do with never seeing Goldberg ever again in a ring, that moment in and of itself was just truly amazing. And I think that's why I like Brock, because every time he steps in the ring, something big is going to happen. There's going to be an epic moment. There's going to be a cool moment, aside from the Dean Ambrose match that was awful. But, even his last WrestleMania match against Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 34, everyone was so sure that Roman Reigns was going to beat him. And then he just gave Roman Reigns a beating and left him bloodied in the ring to end WrestleMania. And while I get the whole notion that he holds the belt hostage and in real life he actually doesn't really care or want to be there, I just have an appreciation because he almost brings me in a time warp, and he just kind of reminds me of the ruthless aggression era and just an old school ass kicking type of character.
He is a guy that doesn't have to say a word and you're scared to death of him. He's a guy I would never want to meet in a back alley, but he's a guy also as frightening as he is, that you said too earlier that you live vicariously through him, because we just imagine being as big and strong as Brock Lesnar, feeling like you could kick anyone's ass, which he probably could kick 99% of the people on planet Earth. So there's a lot to Brock Lesnar. He adds so much in terms of credibility to the product because he's been there, he's done that, and he's not just this quote play fighter. He has gone to the top of the real fighting world in the UFC, and he has beaten the best of the best there. And then to return to WWE, and he's flipped from heel to babyface a couple of times, now back to heel. And do I think they could successfully turn him babyface? Absolutely. I think they really could. As much as fans would say, no, I'm just tired of seeing him, I would beg to differ if WWE formulates a plan, I don't know where or how, or I'm sure Paul Heyman has some ideas that would work. And maybe it's as simple as having, whatever heel is the hottest at the time come in and put him down. Maybe it's Drew McIntyre. It comes in and beats him, to a pulp and embarrasses him or whatever. There's ways to position it that you would actually feel sympathy for Brock Lesnar, which is the key to getting him to turn face, is getting when the heel gets beat down, maybe by another heel that's even more hated, to feel sympathy for that less hated heel and be able to rationalize why you would still want to see that the heel who got beat down rise up and be able to get revenge on the other person. I mean, there's a way to get Brock Lesnar babyface and get him over in a big way. I mean, people think it's impossible now, and it's just not true. Brock Lesnar can easily turn back to being a babyface because he is a true-to-life ass-kicking machine. There's no advertisement needed. There's no fluff needed. He is as advertised. He is what he says he is. He's authentic. That's why you could easily turn him back. Maybe a sit-down promo in the back. I mean, with Paul Heyman's genius and Brock Lesnar's credentials, this is something easily achievable. And I think we'll see before Brock Lesnar's career truly ends in WWE.
Well, the other thing is for the older fans like you and myself, remember his meteoric rise? He beat The Rock at SummerSlam, which I loved your wrestling nostalgia segment on that. So kudos to you. That was excellent. But, just that win, how, the fans got behind him, even though he was booked as the heel, although a lot of that had to do with The Rock with one foot out the door to Hollywood. But that first year that he had, he won King of the Ring. He beat The Rock. Then he turned babyface. He won the Royal Rumble. Paul Heyman actually went against him with the Big Show. Then he had that epic main event match against Kurt Angle at WrestleMania 19. So it's not only what we remember since he came back in 2012 or what he did in UFC right before he came back to WWE. It's what he did when he started in WWE, when he was a full-time competitor, when we saw him night in, night out. And I understand for the younger fans, you just remember him as, we've seen him over the last 7 years or so. But I just can't forget the amount of time and effort that this character and real-life person put into building their credentials. So when I see him, I take him seriously. And like you said, he's as advertised. He is an ass-kicking machine. So I guess for me, it's I like believability, and I always come back to that. That's why, I fell in love with characters like Steve Austin and The Rock. They made you believable. They allowed you to live vicariously through them. We talked about it with Seth. He's so wholesome and John Cena-esque and we this and we that, and I'm going to do it for this guy and not for me. John Cena and The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, and even Brock Lesnar when he was a babyface, they had an edge to them. And, The Rock used to, threaten guys and insult people all the time. I remember him just torching Booker T when he was full-fledged babyface, and he would fully make fun of Booker T every Monday Night Raw. And Stone Cold Steve Austin did everything against the law, but he was a babyface. And Brock Lesnar was that ass-kicking babyface, what was it? I don't even know now, 16 years ago. And I guess that's why I get attracted to Brock, because he brings me back to a time when babyfaces didn't have to be so cut and dry and goody two-shoe. They could be well-liked, but also have a real-life, believable edge to them.
And I think that we don't draw enough on the Brock Lesnar history of 2002 to 2004 of having him just shoot to the top but not feel like it was undeserving. I remember the very first time I saw Brock Lesnar, it was Monday Night Raw 2002. I believe it was during a Jeff Hardy, so the Hardy Boys were facing some tag team, and he comes in and just destroys everybody in the ring. Took a couple of chair shots, but still was standing when chair shots were still a thing to the head. And he looked different. He was this massive guy, but also super athletic. He wasn't one of those, well, I'm going to rely on my size to have a good match. He was more athletic than the guys that were half his size at the time. He could move faster than those guys. He had all the credentials of a true amateur wrestling heavyweight champion in the NCAA, two-time champion. So he had the credentials coming in, And he proved it night in and night out. Could he cut a great promo? No. Brock Lesnar's never been a great promo guy. He's been kind of awkward at times. He never knew how to quite cut that promo. But he never needed to because of the brilliance of Paul Heyman being his mouthpiece. And Paul Heyman has really, really been, I think, underrated in terms of being able to credit the success of Brock Lesnar to Paul Heyman. And so Brock Lesnar, look, I mean, all you have to do is remind fans of what he did for those couple of years in WWE when he was at the absolute top of his game. The fans were ready to cheer him in SummerSlam 2002, and I did a whole show on that, and thanks for the compliments. And so that dynamic, while I was really angry at the fans because I was still a Rock fan, I understand now, removed 17 years, that why the fans were cheering for Brock Lesnar, because The Rock was kind of wearing thin on the fans of the same old Rock with the same old routine and the same old, catchphrases and things. And we all knew he was on his way to Hollywood, and they felt like he was abandoning the fans. And we have this new cool up and coming guy that we've never seen anyone like him before, and he just comes in and he tears crap up. And he's our next guy. He is what Paul Heyman said that he was. He was the next big thing. So now, again, 17 years removed, I understand the dynamic now. But at the time, I was angry. I mean, my brother was watching the show with me, and he was cheering for Brock. I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he kicks out of the rock bottom. Oh man, I was losing my mind. But obviously, 17 years wiser, I understand it now.
Yeah, that takes me back because I remember I was. Oh my God, I think I was 8 at the time, and I was as big as a Rock fan as you came. I loved The Rock, and I was livid when they were booing him and this and that. But, there was no better person to put over than Brock Lesnar at that time. And I guess just to switch gears a bit, I wanted to ask you, what was your opinion and what are you feeling about Sasha Banks right now?
So Sasha Banks, I love it right now. I like that she's came back heel. She feels like a more natural character. I think the babyface boss character certainly ran its course. And after her, being able to never successfully defend the women's championship ever, she would just win it and then in her first title defense lose it. The whole notion and premise that she's the boss became kind of comical. I mean, you're the boss of what? I mean, what exactly does that mean anymore? And she lost her edge. We all know the story after WrestleMania that her and Bayley had a hissy fit backstage. And, I don't know the level of truth to that whole thing of them, losing the women's tag team titles. And yet they were promised that they were going to have a longer run, and they both said, we're done, and Sasha threatened quitting, and we all heard and saw the rumors on all the websites out there. And so, again, I don't know how much truth there is to that, but her coming back as a heel, I love the way she did it. I love that she did it during an emotional time of Natalya talking about her father who was passing and a dream that she had, that her dad's so proud of her. And Sasha Banks chooses the most emotional moment to come out and hug her, and then having, pretending she's going to talk and say something to Natty, and then immediately blindsiding her with a vicious, forearm and attacking her brutally. I loved it. And with Becky coming down to attack Sasha, my only thing is that Sasha Banks defended herself against Becky. Sasha didn't just out of nowhere decide to attack Becky. Becky came out as the aggressor. So that whole dynamic is a little bit weird because Becky decided to go after Sasha, not the other way around. So that's a little bit of a mix-up there. But I overall loved it. I love the attitude. I love the new blue hair. I love how she just symbolically removed the pink hair as if the old me is dead. I would give this an A grade as well. And the follow-up to the promo with the last week on Raw with the "You're Welcome," while it was a little bit clunky from Michael Cole, who just tried to get the thank you in there, which is a little bit clunky. If you look at the actual words of what he said, it was just kind of weird. He knew he had to just get to say thank you so that Sasha could come back with her line of "You're welcome." It was just kind of an attitude from Sasha. I like that she has an edge. She feels more of who she is in that heel role. So overall, to answer your question, I'd give it an A. What did you think?
I'm in the same boat as you. And just quickly before I forget this point, when Becky came out to attack her, I love that Sasha didn't run which most heels nowadays do, and they just squirmish off. Like, no, she took the fight to Becky and she kicked her ass, and I really liked it, and I liked how she continued her aggression on Raw this past week. Like when she attacked Natty, and then she said like that, go to hell and tell your dad I say hi or something. Like, I love the aggressive heel that seeks out the fight, because we just talked about it earlier. The heels nowadays are usually always like these slimy, squirmish heels that run and hide and can't do anything by themselves. So I like that she started it. I like that she's ending the fight. And to be honest, I think that she's the perfect opponent for Becky Lynch. Since Becky Lynch won the Raw Women's Championship, who has been her challengers? Okay, Lacey Evans was good, but there wasn't really enough credibility. And while I was a Lacey Evans fan, I never really once thought that she could take the belt off of Becky. Natalya, too. Like, Natalya really surprised me, and I liked her feud with Becky. I thought she exceeded expectations, at least from my point of view, and I enjoyed their match, but there was never really a point where I truly believed as if she could take the belt off of Becky. Sasha is someone that has history with Becky. The story writes itself. The 4 horsewomen came up from NXT together. Sasha's a 4-time Raw Women's Champion, so the credibility's there. And now you're turning her heel, and, for the first time ever, I could actually look at Becky's challenger and actually think that they pose a legitimate threat.
Yes, and I don't know about you or where you stand with Becky, but I am ready for Becky to drop the belt. I was a little bit more behind Becky than I was Kofi. I think that there's a different feeling there than with Kofi. And I'm just ready, and I think Sasha, or rather Becky, has been very heelish over the last month and a half, and I don't know if that's on purpose or if it's not, but she's obnoxious, and not in a cool way, like, oh, you're the edgy face. She's just obnoxious and annoying. And when she had the program with her boyfriend Seth, that further just made me want to see somebody take the belt off Becky and have this Becky 2 belts, Becky red belt, Becky whatever belt, be Becky no belts. I am done with Becky as champion. And look, it's not that I wasn't in support. I was in full support, and I'm glad that we had the run and we had the feel good, again, the fairy tale that we talked about with Kofi. We've had it. She had her crazy big moment at WrestleMania as the main event, even though half the people were asleep or trying to get on the train back to their hotels. I mean, it was a big ass moment, and I loved it, and I was on board with it. But everything has a shelf life. Everything has an expiration date, and I'm ready for Becky to drop the belt. And Sasha Banks is the perfect candidate to come along and take it as an obnoxious, cocky heel. The story, as you said, is just, it's set up. It's right there. Just take it and go. It's low-hanging fruit. It's easy to tell. Don't overcomplicate it. And they have something really special here. And as you said, too, I mean, with the heels not always having to run and Sasha not running, yes, Sasha did not run. And I'm glad she didn't, because heels don't always have to follow the same formula to be a heel. There's like certain qualifications that you have to be a heel in WWE. And it's, you got to run. You don't want to be in a fight. You want to take cheap shots. Well, what about the kick-ass heel that has a really bad attitude? I mean, what about that? Those kinds of people exist in the world, where they're badass people in terms of being able to, beat their opponent into a bloody pulp, and yet they brag about it too. I mean, there's people like that. They're not always the slimy people that come in and only take cheap shots and the easy way out. There are people like Sasha Banks exhibited on Monday Night Raw that can kick ass and then brag about it. I don't need to run. I know I can beat you. And so that's what I liked with the new Sasha Banks, and I hope it continues.
Yeah, and just to go back on Becky for a second, I've been over her since she won the belt. I think I really turned on Becky when that whole angle with Stephanie and Triple H started, where they were just asking for an apology and she was acting like a spoiled brat. And I knew she was going to win the belt. And like you touched on, I'm happy that they did it, but ever since that whole angle went down with her and Triple H and Stephanie, and it kind of carried over post-WrestleMania, and she's just become the bratty, obnoxious girl. Like, I remember I was at the Monday Night Raw when she still had both titles, and she's just walking around the ring, And for about 3 minutes straight, all she kept saying was, "I'm the champ. I'm the champ. No one's me." And I'm just like, okay, like, what are you doing? Like, you're just parading around. Like, you make me. I'm hoping someone comes in and kicks your teeth down your throat. And that's not the way I'm supposed to feel. And I know I just said that I don't always like the goody two-shoe person, but at the same time, you can't just be like a brat. And, you know, even her insults, like a dope, like, what are you doing? Like, it's not a likable character right now. Like, I haven't seen her smile in God knows how long. And even if she does smile, it's an arrogant, you know, cocky smile, like when she was asking Alexa Bliss to punch her and she's skipping around. So I've been over Becky for a long, long time, and I've always kind of liked Sasha Banks. She did kind of fall flat a bit as if in the latter days of her face run, but I find it's a perfect storm. I'm over Becky. I really like Sasha Banks, and I think that, you know, they have to strike while the iron's hot here. I don't think they're going to have a better opportunity to take the belt off Becky than they do right now.
Oh, no. This is the time. I'm ready. I think the fans have had their time to cheer her and say, thank you, WWE, for giving us this journey. And great. I mean, be very, very thankful for it. I'm thankful for it. They did the right thing. They put the belt on Becky, even though I still think it should have been one-on-one with Rousey. I still believe that. So they did the right thing. And now it's just run its course. That's all. There's nothing wrong with that. It's run its course, and it's now time for somebody else to hold the belt. And I love babyfaces in chase mode. It's always a better story anyway. And Sasha Banks could be a great, really good heel champion. And so, furthermore, I believe that even after Becky and Sasha have their program, after Becky fails in her regaining the championship and maybe their follow-up pay-per-view, I think Becky could be a truly good heel. And I'm not talking about a heel turn that is really a babyface turn like at SummerSlam last year. I'm talking about like a true heel turn where it's a successful heel turn because she's already showing qualities of an annoying character. She's just super annoying, as you said, with her insults that are not insults. They're childish, not funny at all insults. And her talking, just the way she speaks, I mean, I don't know, her bravado and her arrogance is not endearing, and it's not you being the man. It's you just being an obnoxious human being it's not a likable quality in a human being to act the way she does. It's just not. It's not endearing. It's not me trying to live vicariously through you. It's me wanting to see somebody beat the holy hell out of you, and seeing Sasha Banks do it made me feel really good and feel confident that she could very well be that next person to take the belt off of her, and I'm looking forward to it. But on another note, too, sort of similar, is the Kevin Owens and Shane McMahon feud that is continuing to go on here to the dismay of many. And while I really am over Shane McMahon in a ring being able to be believed as going toe-to-toe with anybody in WWE, I felt a little bit discouraged this week with Kevin Owens basically begging Shane McMahon to take back the $100,000 fine. And furthermore, he was more humiliated at the end of the night when Shane McMahon pulled a fast one on him, doing the fast 3 count, and then him sprinting out of the ring. And first of all, this $100,000 fine is absolutely ridiculous because of the fact that, hey, Elias is not, if you're going to go by this storyline here, he's not a true WWE official. He's not a hired official. He doesn't have the title of official. He has the title of talent or performer or sports entertainer, whatever label you want to put him on. Just because he played a referee doesn't mean he's actually a true referee in the eyes of WWE corporate, if you want to go this way. So Kevin Owens, I'm surprised, didn't take that turn and say, hey, I don't believe that Elias's contract with WWE reads as an official. It reads as a talent, right? So, and he's making himself look like a fool by going back on and undoing all of the good that he did, being a babyface with the stunner, although the Stunno and Stun thing is a little bit heavy-handed with his T-shirt. I just felt like he got neutered this week in a very big way. What did you think about all this?
I just, I like the chemistry between the two of them, but I'm kind of over it. We went down this road, what was it, 2 years ago, except Kevin Owens was the heel, Shane was the face. I didn't like how you said that Owens got neutered. Like, I was kind of cool to see a different dynamic of them. But at the same time, like, I kind of want Owens to move on to bigger and better things. And I love Shane McMahon. I've always been a Shane McMahon fan. But, like, after SummerSlam, like, it just kind of felt like, you know, he was going to go away for a bit. And then he would reemerge maybe Survivor Series or even Royal Rumble. And he would have another feud and another agenda to get to. I think Kevin Owens, like, he was burning really hot. But over the last week or so, like, it's kind of died down a bit. I don't know. I didn't hate the storyline. Like, it was entertaining, and I have all the time in the world for Shane McMahon and Kevin Owens. I just think that they're just prolonging this for the sake of prolonging it, when I really thought that SummerSlam was supposed to just be the blowover of the whole feud.
I thought it was going to be too. I thought it was going to be the end of it. And Kevin Owens had the reaction I think many fans did when after Kevin beat him clean, he comes out on SmackDown 2 nights later and says he's moving on and focusing on King of the Ring, and Shane McMahon's music hits. And Kevin Owens just put his head in his hands and like collapsed in the ring like, oh my God, enough. And I think a lot of fans felt that way. And look, I'm a Shane O'Mac fan too. Maybe partly nostalgia, maybe partly he's just a great heel. But it's just time to move on from that and have Kevin actually in a true program with a real talent that he can use to progress his career and maybe move on to a championship picture. And Shane McMahon's just nothing more than a distraction right now for Kevin Owens and his progression as a babyface. And so I don't know where they're going. This clearly it's to another match because Kevin Owens got eliminated from the tournament and in the first round. So Kevin Owens is clearly on the path to another match with Shane McMahon. I hope, but this better be their last one. And not because I hate Shane McMahon and not because I dislike Kevin Owens. It's because it's doing a disservice to Kevin Owens, who's really gotten a lot of momentum over the last month and a half, turning truly babyface. And it's just, I'm ready for it to be over. I'm ready for Kevin to be in a program with a real individual that could actually help his career. And that's the issue I'm having with it.
Yeah, and he's putting on some of his best work right now in terms of his character, and I want him to chase a championship like you just mentioned. And again, I hate to bring it back to Kofi here, but I see a guy like Kevin who has been a world champion before and a U.S. champion, an Intercontinental champion, and just screams world champion, at least in my mind, and you have the belt sitting on Kofi wasting away, like we just touched on, and Kevin's just in a feud that's seemingly never ending and somewhat meaningless with Shane McMahon. Like I said, I have all the time in the world for Shane McMahon, and I'll always like him, and I have always liked him, even before he returned to WWE in his early days. But it's just a feud that how long could it possibly go on for? Especially given the fact that in 2017 and 2018, they had a 6-7 month long feud that culminated in a WrestleMania match. Although it was a tag team, but still. And it's just, how many times can you go back to the well? We understand that they have good chemistry, and it is still entertaining. But it's gonna run its course, and maybe it already has. And I want them to maximize this Kevin Owens face turn in something a bit more rewarding than just an ongoing feud with Shane McMahon.
And as much as I enjoy the stunner on Shane, who sells it like no other, it's like he's got springs in his legs. I love it. And certainly the stunner is helping Kevin Owens, and I understand that they're trying to also draw a dynamic a little bit between Stone Cold and Kevin Owens, not just because he's using the stunner, but because he's the anti-authority figure and he's attacking Shane and all that, and he's, I get it, but what they did on SmackDown this past week, I just really didn't like. I understand that he's trying to, he's only saying he's sorry and trying to, make amends with Shane because, it's affecting my family. And I'm sitting there thinking, look, can't you appeal this? Can't you go to the board of directors? And furthermore, you're a WWE superstar, and I don't think that anybody would be stupid enough to not believe you're making well beyond 6 figures to begin with, and you've been making that money for a very, very long time. So odds are that you have enough money to absorb this anyway. So, I mean, like, all of it, and having him cower to Shane, if Stone Cold was put in this position and Vince McMahon fined him $100,000 for putting his hands on him back in the day, you would have had Stone Cold Steve Austin tell Vince McMahon to take the fine and shove it up his ass. That's just what would have happened, and he would have continued to defy Vince McMahon. And instead, Kevin Owens comes in and sulks and tries to make amends with Shane and have him reverse the decision for the fine. It was just not a good look for all that Kevin Owens has stood for over the last couple of months.
Yeah, it was very counterproductive, and I'm not saying that they always have to draw a parallel between Kevin Owens and Shane McMahon, but at the same time, you don't want to discredit all the things that he's done, which is exactly what it happened in turn. And I don't know, even him being involved in the King of the Ring, and I don't want to say that a lot of the members of the tournament are meaningless and kind of irrelevant, but they somewhat are. And I just want bigger and better things for Kevin Owens. I want them to create a new star, if you will, because on the SmackDown brand, you kind of lack that star power. Like, okay, I know they technically have Roman Reigns, but he's all over the place, and they have Daniel Bryan too. But like we said, like, you got to plan for life after Kofi. And, you know, Randy Orton is getting up there in age, so he won't be around for a long time. And I think that they're kind of missing out on a really good opportunity here with Kevin Owens.
They are right now, yes, they are. And I you know, him and Samoa Joe have always been kind of in the same boat to me. Of why are they not carrying a major championship and doing it for a long time? They could be amazing champions, and particularly Samoa Joe too, who, yes, he won his first match of the King of the Ring tournament. Do I ultimately think he's going to win the whole thing? He'd be in my top 4 of possible winners of this, and that's kind of a bit of a transition to the King of the Ring tournament itself. I wanted to ask you about not just who your pick is, but what's your overall feeling on how WWE has been treating this tournament?
I think it's a change of pace. I like it. I think the last person to win it, or in the last time it did happen, was King Barrett, if I'm not mistaken. That was almost 5 years ago, if not longer. But I like it. I think it's another way to involve some wrestlers that wouldn't have otherwise not likely have gotten this screen time. I think it's a way to catapult the career forward, which I really do think is important for a lot of these talented wrestlers. I really like how they organize the bracket as Raw on one side and SmackDown on the other. I think that was proper booking. So kudos to WWE for that. And although there is somewhat wildcard nonsense still going on, they are separating it more, which I am liking. But as for wrestlers, I think that might go far. I think Andrade has a good chance to go really far, but I think when all is said and done, I'm really expecting Drew McIntyre to win this whole thing.
He's my pick too, and the only thing that scares me about this is Booker T picked him, Michael Cole picked him, and when you have, you know, personalities on air picking, you know, their selections, how often, just like when they do it on the kickoff panel, I mean, who do you think's going to win? And, you know, you always have people that just pick ridiculous selections, and you automatically know that it's not going to be that person. So it scares me that Booker T is picking Drew. It scares me that Michael Cole is picking Drew, because that usually signals, well, I guess that person's not going to win. But Drew McIntyre is, I think, the right choice. Even if it's predictable, I don't care. There's a lot you could do with King McIntyre. It's a tournament that is typically built for a heel to win. I mean, in the past, 10 years, there's been 2 King of the Ring tournaments. It's been Wade Barrett and it's been Sheamus, who have capitalized on the King of the Ring winner. And did they actually go anywhere? No. So I like the positioning of WWE, making this feel like a really important tournament, even though there is really nothing more than bragging rights. That's what the King of the Ring tournament is. It's nothing more than just saying, hey, I won this tournament. I'm better than everybody that competed in this tournament. I don't get a championship match, but it's bragging rights. It's a perfect heel attribute that you could use for Drew. I think he's tailor-made for this. Now, there's Raw on one side, SmackDown on the other. I can't wait until Survivor Series when they tell us this is the one night a year that SmackDown and Raw go head-to-head. I can't wait for that marketing to come out just like they did last year. That kind of stuff just irks me when they do that, because there's like 5 other pay-per-views during the year, and the wild card rule on top of it that would totally negate that argument. But nonetheless, I will entertain them in their marketing slogan for Survivor Series this year. But Drew McIntyre, to me, the favorite. I don't care if it's predictable. He's the right choice.
Yeah, and as you look at the bracket, like you could make a case for maybe Cedric Alexander or perhaps The Miz to get him back on track. And I mentioned Andrade, but like you said, like what other wrestler could have the moniker and carry it like McIntyre, like King McIntyre? Like he already wears that cloak, so that kind of has him a step ahead of the game right off the bat. But yeah, I just think that he's the right choice. I think he's a guy that of all the guys there is the closest to being a top tier superstar, and at the top of the food chain. And it could catapult him into the title scene, where I think he's inevitably going to end up. And like you said, even though it is predictable, he's the right choice, and there's no one else that I could possibly make the case for over McIntyre.
No, there's not. I mean, yeah, could you make Andrade? Yeah, maybe. I mean, King Andrade, maybe he gets to the semifinals, and I'm fine with that. There's a lot of guys that are going to go deep into this tournament that I think WWE is going to make us question whether or not Drew McIntyre is actually going to be the guy. Because, let's face it, Drew McIntyre is going to at least make it to the semifinals, if not in the final match. And then maybe they do the good old swerve and whoever's facing him wins. I don't know. But it's going to be a heel and babyface in the final. It just is. I mean, that's just pro wrestling law, that you'll have a heel and the face in the final of the match. So it's not a matter of if Drew is going to get to the finals, I think. It's a matter of who's he going to be facing on the other side of that ring. And I think that I honestly don't even know. Could it be Andrade? Maybe. And that would be a hell of an interesting match. Andrade is ultra talented too. So I'm looking forward to the tournament more than I have in years past. I just hope that it's not just one of these all lip service and no substance types of wins for whoever gets this win. It needs to do something for their career. Booker T was one of the biggest beneficiaries of the King of the Ring tournament turning into King Booker and having Sharmell and just the obnoxiousness. He was so good in that role. That turned Booker T's career around. And I'm not saying they need to duplicate that with whoever wins this, but it certainly needs to actually do something of substance other than just being obnoxious, pretending that we're all the peasants or the common people, or using cliches and carrying the scepter around and wearing the crown. It needs to actually do something for the person that wins this tournament.
Yeah, well, Booker T, man. All hail King Booker! My God, I hear that in my nightmares sometimes. But yeah, it really turned him around. If I were to look at the bracket, I think from the SmackDown side, if it is Drew, I could see Buddy Murphy going far. I think that he would be a good choice for it. Or Ali, one of those two guys. But I just think that Drew fits the mold perfectly for someone who could carry around that moniker and take that whole, that ambiance of being the king to the next level and not make it just one-dimensional and predictable, like you said, about saying the common people and whatever. But yeah, I really do like Drew to win this, and I can't think of anyone else who I would really like it. Like, obviously Samoa Joe could use the win, but I just don't think he fits, like, maybe the description of, or what, maybe not description's the right word, but I can't see him winning the King of the Ring. I really see it being Drew McIntyre, and I think that his character's the perfect guy to take that not championship, but that tournament win and, make it known to everyone of how important it is and bring credibility to it. Because that's the other thing about this, is you can't have a wrestler win it who doesn't have that much credibility. Like a guy like Andrade or Ali or Buddy Murphy, while they're all great in the ring, they don't really have any credentials to stand on. Drew has it. He's already, drawn that line in the sand of what kind of superstar he is. So I really think that there's no other proper answer here for the winner other than Drew McIntyre.
All right. Well, I mean, I think we're in lockstep here with who we think should win, even though it's not a very unique or clever choice or a sleeper or a dark horse. It is the favorite, but that's not an issue to me because that's the correct booking. So, one last thing I wanted to talk to you about, and then I'll, if there's anything else I missed, let me know. What do you think about Roman Reigns' attacker being revealed as, well, I guess the only reaction is, who?
I mean, I kind of thought that it was gonna end up being Daniel Bryan in the end. So I think this is just Daniel Bryan and Rowan trying to pull a fast one on Roman Reigns, finding someone who looks like an ugly cousin of Eric Rowan, just Rowan. So I think eventually this is going to lead to a one-on-one clash between Daniel Bryan and Roman Reigns. So for that, in that respect, I do like it because I think Roman Reigns and Daniel Bryan will have good chemistry together, both in terms of their character and inside the ring. I was a bit surprised that WWE went down this road. It was kind of creative from their standpoint, but I really liked it because I think it's just a means to an end, and that end will be Daniel Bryan versus Roman Reigns.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the reasoning that we were all told that's why that match didn't happen at SummerSlam, because they wanted to tell the story. They wanted the slow burn. They wanted to flesh out the story, and I respect that. I like that. And that's what this is all about. It's storytelling at the end of the day. As cliche as that may sound, that's ultimately what we want to have, is a great story, and I respect them for wanting to flesh this out. And, of course, the person that was revealed as his evil twin brother or whatever, we all know it's not that person, because that would be a super just dull, boring, terrible way to end this whole program, and the incessant and constant replays of the crates and the falling on Roman, and the car that almost hit him, which amazingly had a dash cam on it, and the camera angle that was perfectly behind the scaffolding falling on Roman, and which I don't want to get into. That irks me, but it needs to be somebody of substance, somebody that makes sense, and something that's a big payoff. To me, there's nobody else other than Bryan that it can be. It's just a roundabout way to get to the ultimate answer of Daniel Bryan, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that because there's history from those two that you could pull on too, and to hear Daniel Bryan's explanation from this is going to be the most interesting part of not only why he did it, but why he tried to hide that he did it, and pull in somebody that's really nothing more than a distraction from the true culprit, which is him. So, yeah, I'm on board for this. A whodunit is not something that is, I think, overdone in pro wrestling. I can't remember the last time a whodunit was introduced in WWE.
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously the obvious one is the Rikishi, Triple H, Stone Cold fiasco.
Yeah.
But, Daniel Bryan, with the way he talks, he can do anything he wants. He could sell ice to an Eskimo, as the saying goes. But I just think that Daniel Bryan's character can get me engaged in anything, and I think that it's turning into a slow build towards Roman Reigns and Daniel Bryan, and I am looking forward to Daniel Bryan's reasoning, because I know I'm talking as if it's guaranteed to be Daniel Bryan, but I'm pretty positive it is. But I'm looking forward to see Daniel Bryan's rationale behind it, why he attacked Roman Reigns, what his beef is with Roman Reigns. And I think that they're going to have good chemistry in the ring. I think they had a match against one another right before WrestleMania 31, if I'm not mistaken. I forget the pay-per-view. Maybe it was Elimination Chamber. But they seem to have styles that complement each other well. They're both very good in-ring workers. And I just think it's going to be a good match to blow it off. And I'm just all for the Daniel Bryan character. And I feel like no matter who he's feuding with, I'm always drawn to that particular feud.
And it was, I think it was Fastlane. I think it was the Fastlane before WrestleMania, and that was because of all the controversy surrounding the Royal Rumble, in which Daniel Bryan was eliminated. The fans were up in arms, and so the WWE was forced to put those two in a match together to make the fans feel like Roman Reigns earned it, even though Roman Reigns beat him and pissed off the fans even further. So Yeah, and like you said about Daniel Bryan's character, which I think is being overlooked in this whole thing, Daniel Bryan's character is evolving very nicely, and I don't think that it's even being talked about, is that Daniel Bryan's character is turning from the the holier than thou vegan to this almost psychotic version of himself that is just the things he's doing with his facials and his eyes and just the way he's speaking to people, getting in their face, and like it's disturbing, and it's very well done by Bryan, and he's turning into this, like, going into some kind of psychosis at times. I love it. It's a nice evolution of his character, and I hope they don't just bury him after Roman Reigns and him, end up having this match, and maybe he ends up pulling off a victory with, all the rumors of Luke Harper coming back and maybe helping Daniel Bryan win. I mean, there's tons of theories out there, but I hope they don't just end up deciding to bury Daniel Bryan for the sake of, well, babyface has to win in the end. There's a way to stretch this out and string it out, and I hope that they do, because Daniel Bryan is, I don't think it's being talked about enough, just how good of a job he's doing as a heel and evolving his character into this psychotic version of himself.
Yeah, well, I've loved the development of this character, and I'm with you there. I hope that it's not just Daniel Bryan just jobbing to Roman Reigns in the end. But I didn't hear those Luke Harper rumors. I would be here all day for that. It would almost be like a Junior Wyatt family reunion there, but I just think I'm really hoping that Daniel Bryan gets back to the world title picture. I feel like that's where he belongs. I feel like he can do anything when he puts his, like, how would I put it? When the belt is on Daniel Bryan, he can do anything, because he can make you love him, he can make you hate him, he could be psychotic, he could be real. I'm liking the heel Daniel Bryan more than the babyface one that kind of got stale after a while, but I still enjoyed. But I don't think it's just going to end up being Daniel Bryan losing to Roman Reigns in the end. I think it's going to be a longer, more thought-out build than that. And I could see this stretching as long as to, like, Royal Rumble or something.
I'd be on board for that, because from what I remember, those two work very well together. Roman Reigns, I mean, as much as I really, really despise his babyface character, is very good in the ring. He had an exceedingly good match with Buddy Murphy last week, although credit clearly goes to Buddy Murphy too, who made a name for himself. But you got to have two to tango, and Roman Reigns certainly held up his end. And so I have no doubt that these two could have matches of the night when you put them together. It's a great dynamic from what I remember from their match. Of course, this was, 4 years ago or more. That was 4 years ago, and that was good then. It could be even better now and should be even better now. And so I'm looking forward to these two locking up. Again, we're all making the assumption it's Daniel Bryan, and I just don't see any other way that it's not. It just has to end with Daniel Bryan. There's just no other way that this could possibly end that would make sense and be satisfying, other than Daniel Bryan being the mastermind behind this. And again, his reasoning is interesting. If Luke Harper does indeed return, people have speculated that he's actually the one behind it. I don't know if that would be as big of a payoff as Daniel Bryan. I would be fine if Luke Harper returned to help him. But for him to be the true culprit, I don't see how they could write a story that would make sense for Luke Harper, out of all people, to be the one to literally try to kill him in vehicular homicide. I mean, so it would be interesting. And I always thought that Luke Harper was super underutilized and sorely misbooked and all of that. I'm on that train. But for him to be the ultimate culprit, I don't know. He could be an accomplice like Triple H was Rikishi's accomplice back in 1999 at the Survivor Series when Austin got run down, which I think is the last time they did it. But to me, it's Daniel Bryan or it's nobody.
Yeah, and maybe Luke Harper could come in as an element to maybe prolong the story. Daniel Bryan could still look like a good Samaritan trying to help Roman Reigns, find the guy and still look like he didn't do it. And just, like I said, make it more of a slow burn. So in that regard, I wouldn't mind if Luke Harper was involved in some aspect. But like you said, it can't be the huge payoff. As much as I like Luke Harper and you do, he doesn't have the credibility or the star power for it to be him. It would be such a major letdown. And then what would Daniel Bryan's angle be? at the end of the day, he still is a heel. He isn't helping Roman Reigns just out of the goodness of his heart. He's a heel, and he has some ulterior motive. And the ulterior motive in the end has to be that he was the guy behind it.
I think we're in lockstep here. Was there anything else that maybe we didn't touch on that you wanted to bring up?
No, I think we got everything. Man, we've been talking for over 2 hours now. It's crazy how fast we go across everything here.
And then go outside of it too. I mean, we always dip into things that aren't going on now, but that's what's great, because there are so many things that happen now that you can draw parallels from even 20 years ago. That, sometimes it's the old adage of what's old is new again. And so, yeah, I mean, look, it's always, anytime you talk wrestling, it goes like, it feels like 15 minutes have gone by, and that's just the nature of the beast. But it's always a blast. Yeah,
it was a lot of fun. And like I said, for the most part, all positives to touch on.
Oh, there is. And I always try to make sure that we spin positives in here, and you did a good job of getting me back on track a couple of times. And, look, overall, if I was going to put a bow on this whole thing, I think that WWE's headed in the right direction. They are sending clear signals that they're making small changes, and that small changes add up to a overall different feel for the product. And I think that they're doing that. They're on the right path. Now, of course, we'll need a larger sample size, but for the last few weeks, things have felt different, and it's been in a positive way. Of course, not without its criticisms, but as a whole, I'm liking the product a lot more than I was just a month ago.
Yeah, as a whole, they are moving in the right direction, and besides some little knickknacks here and there, I have nothing but positives to say about it right now.
No, hey, I can't remember the last time that we were able to say that, and maybe it's because of AEW, the pressure of this new and up and coming, Wednesday night war that's going to be going on with NXT and AEW, or I don't even know. I mean, that's going to be a hell of an interesting fall in this year with AEW, and as we start to get closer into WrestleMania season. I mean, it's going to be a very, very busy fall with football coming back and everything else too. So I don't know. I'm looking forward to it, and it's always a pleasure. But before you go, Anthony, let everybody know where they can find you on social media.
You can find me on Twitter at DiMarco25, and that's the same for my Instagram handle if you want to check me out there.
And you tweet about hockey too. Don't forget. If you guys love hockey, that's the place to go too.
Yeah, that's it. I forgot to put my caution there, but yeah, I caution anyone who's going to follow me on Twitter that you should like hockey, or you may be bored very fast.
That is true. So, all right. Well, Anthony, as always, a blast to talk to you. And 3 weeks go by really quick. So the next time we talk, we will be right on the cusp of Clash of Champions, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Talk to you in 3 weeks.
All right, take care.